Have you ever wondered why God sometimes removes people from your life? Why seasons of loneliness appear out of nowhere? And why the people he used the most often walked alone first? What if your loneliness isn't punishment? What if it's preparation? Because in the Bible, isolation was never the end of the story. It was where God did his deepest work. 1. God uses solitude before he uses people. Look at Joseph. Before he ruled a nation, he sat alone in a prison cell. No friends, no applause, no one believed in his dreams. But that lonely place wasn't empty. God was shaping his character. Look at David. Before he became king, he spent years alone in the wilderness, running for his life. And it was there that he learned to trust God more than people. Even Jesus, before beginning his ministry, withdrew into the wilderness for 40 days, alone, praying, preparing. Here's the truth most people miss. Isolation is not always rejection. Sometimes it's divine preparation. God removes distractions so you can hear his voice more clearly. He separates you from people so your identity is built in him, not in their approval. That's why Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, "To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven." And maybe this season of being alone isn't something you need to escape. Maybe it's something you need to embrace, because the strength God builds in solitude can never be taken away. 2. Being alone teaches you to depend on God. Most people fear being alone because it exposes what distractions once covered. The silence becomes louder, the doubts become clearer, and suddenly you realize how much you've depended on people for peace, validation, and strength. But that's exactly where God begins his work. When Jacob was left alone, he wrestled with God all night, and he didn't leave the same person. Genesis 32:24 says, "And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day." That lonely night changed his identity forever. Sometimes God allows isolation because he wants to become your greatest source of comfort. Not your friends, not social media, not the approval of others, just him. Because faith grows strongest when there's no one else to lean on. And the person who learns to stand with God in solitude will never be shaken by the opinions of people. So if you feel alone right now, don't rush the process. God may be teaching you something that crowds never could. 3. Your greatest growth happens in secret. We live in a world that celebrates being seen. More followers, more attention, more applause. But God often works in the opposite way. He grows you in secret before he reveals you in public. Think about Moses. For 40 years, he lived in the wilderness. No crowds, no title, no platform. It probably felt like he was forgotten. But God was preparing a deliverer. The wilderness wasn't wasting Moses. It was building him. And maybe God is doing the same with you. The prayers no one hears. The tears no one sees. The battles you fight in silence. None of it is wasted, because character is built when no one is watching. Jesus said in Matthew 6:6, "But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." The world chases visibility, but God values intimacy. And sometimes the season that feels the loneliest becomes the season that changes you the most. So don't despise your quiet season. The roots growing beneath the surface are preparing you for a harvest greater than you can imagine. 4. God removes people so you can find yourself in him. One of the hardest parts of being alone is watching people walk away. Friends stop calling, relationships end. The people you thought would stay disappear, and for a moment you wonder, God, why are you taking everyone away? But what if he's not taking from you? What if he's protecting you? Not everyone is meant to go where God is taking you. Sometimes he removes voices that confuse you so you can hear his voice clearly. That's exactly what happened to Elijah. After one of his greatest victories, he found himself alone in the wilderness, exhausted, afraid, ready to give up. But God didn't abandon him there. Instead, God spoke to him, not through the wind, not through the earthquake, not through the fire, but through a gentle whisper. And Elijah heard God's voice in a way he never had before. Sometimes God separates you from people because intimacy with him cannot grow in constant noise. Your loneliness may actually be an invitation to pray deeper, to trust more, to discover who you are when no one else is around. Because the person who is secure in God doesn't fear being alone. They know that when they have God, they are never truly alone. So if you're in a lonely season right now, don't fight it, don't rush out of it, and don't mistake it for abandonment. Because some of God's greatest work happens when it's just you and him. And one day, you'll look back and realize the season you thought was breaking you was actually the season God used to make you stronger than ever. So the next time you feel alone, ask yourself this: what if God isn't isolating me from my purpose? What if he's isolating me for my purpose? And if that's true, then your greatest season may not be behind you. It may be starting right now. Comment the word strong if you're choosing to trust God in your season of solitude. And remember, sometimes the strongest people are not the ones surrounded by crowds, but the ones who learned to walk with God when no one else was there.